I was holding my bouquet 2 steps from the chapel doors when my phone buzzed. At first, I thought it was just someone texting congratulations. But the moment I glanced down, my entire world stopped. Your employment with Halcyon Design is hereby terminated, effective immediately. Claudia Rice. No explanation, no call, just one cold sentence, sent by my boss on my wedding day. I remember the way my hands shook, the way the white flowers in my bouquet blurred as tears welled up. People were smiling, music was playing, and I was standing there like the ground had just opened beneath me. I had spent 2 years giving everything to that company, late nights, missed holidays. I was running their biggest project. And now, just like that, erased, fired by text, seconds before I was supposed to walk down the aisle. Why now? Why then? What kind of person does that? Before I tell you what happened next, can I ask, where are you watching from? And more importantly, have you ever been blindsided by someone you trusted? Someone who didn't just hurt you, but picked the one moment when it would sting the most? If this reminds you of something, leave a comment below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. I stood frozen at the edge of the aisle, that text still glowing on my screen like a burn I couldn't look away from. My maid of honor whispered, "Eden, are you okay?" I couldn't speak, just held up the phone. Her eyes widened as she read it, but before she could say anything, Lucas appeared. He took one look at my face, then the phone, and gently wrapped his hand around mine. "Hey," he said softly, "whatever that is, it doesn't belong to today." My voice barely made it out. She fired me. Claudia, she actually fired me. Lucas didn't flinch. He leaned in, kissed the back of my hand, and said, "Let it go, at least for now. You and me, that's what matters right now." I wanted to scream, to walk out, to demand answers. But there was something about the way he looked at me, grounded, steady, like he already knew something I didn't. I tucked my phone into the pocket of my maid of honor's purse. I took a breath, and I walked. The music swelled. Guests stood. My heart beat against my ribcage like it was trying to escape, not because I was getting married, but because something far bigger was unraveling just outside the frame of that perfect day. Still, I smiled. I said I do. I held on to Lucas like he was the only solid thing left. And for the rest of the afternoon, I played the role, the happy bride, the glowing wife, even as something deep in my gut whispered, "This isn't over." I had no idea how right that voice would be. Because just a few hours later, everything exploded. By the time we finished our first dance, I had almost convinced myself to forget about it. The text, the firing, all of it. Almost. Then my maid of honor rushed over, out of breath, eyes wide. "Eden, your phone, it won't stop buzzing." I followed her to the bridal suite and pulled it from her purse. 37 missed calls. By the time I blinked, that number had climbed to 41. There were voicemails, too, from coworkers from the company landline, and most unsettling of all, 5 missed calls from Jeff Halcyon himself, the founder, the man who hadn't so much as glanced in my direction for the past year. My chest tightened. One message stood out, time-stamped just after the ceremony. "Eden, call me. Claudia have no authority to terminate you. This is a huge problem. We need to talk, now." Another one followed. "No one can access your project system. The Cascade submission files are locked. Eden, please, this is urgent." I sat down slowly, the layers of my dress folding around me like a silk cage. They couldn't get into the system, the one I had built, the one only I understood. A system they had relied on but never respected. And now they were panicking. Something inside me shifted. Not anger, not yet. It was quieter than that, colder, like ice cracking beneath the surface of a frozen lake. All those nights I stayed late, all the weekends I gave up, all the credit they redirected elsewhere, and now without me, they were lost. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel powerless. I felt necessary. And that's when I realized maybe losing my job wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning of something they never saw coming. Later that evening, after most of the guests had gone and the music faded to background hums, I found Lucas standing alone near the balcony of our suite. He was watching the ocean, still in his dress shirt and tie, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened just slightly. He looked calm, unshaken. I, on the other hand, had barely touched my champagne. My fingers wouldn't stop tapping the side of the glass. I stood beside him, unsure where to begin. But he didn't wait for me. "I know about the system," he said quietly. I blinked. "You do?" Lucas nodded, still looking at the waves. "I've seen how critical it's become, and how no one really understands how it works except you." I narrowed my eyes, studying him. "How?" He finally turned to face me. "Because I've been tracking the permits and the changes." His voice dropped lower. "Eden, there are discrepancies, major ones, entire load-bearing wall specs missing from finalized documents, fire exit layouts removed, materials downgraded, but only in the versions after your sign-off." A chill ran down my spine. "You think Claudia?" "I don't think," he said. "I know. I've been building a report for weeks. She's been altering the records and submitting them under your name, quietly, sloppily, but just enough to pass if no one looked closely." I couldn't speak. My breath caught somewhere between rage and disbelief. "And then she fired you," Lucas added, his voice flat. "Right before the final deadline, right before anything could be traced." I looked at him, searching his face for doubt. "There wasn't any. She wanted you gone, Eden," he said gently, "so that if something went wrong, you'd take the fall." The room felt smaller, the air heavier. My wedding day had turned into a trap, and somehow I'd walked right into it. But if Claudia thought I'd stay quiet, she didn't know me at all. We left for our honeymoon the next morning, just the two of us, a tucked-away cabin overlooking the Mendocino Cliffs. No Wi-Fi, barely any signal. Just crashing waves, the scent of pine, and long silences that said more than words ever could. I didn't check my phone for 2 days. It sat buried in my suitcase, turned off, ignored. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up thinking about work. I didn't rush to check deadlines or reread emails I'd already memorized. I just existed, with Lucas and the sound of the sea. But the silence didn't last forever. On the third evening, we drove into town for dinner, a quiet spot with warm lights and sourdough bread that melted in your mouth. While Lucas ordered dessert, I finally turned my phone back on. 132 missed calls, voicemails, texts, emails stacked like panicked dominoes, most from Jeff. A few from Claudia, some from numbers I didn't even recognize. One of Jeff's messages played automatically. "Eden, I'm begging you, just give us the access credentials. We'll pay whatever you want. Name your price." Another, followed, his voice shakier this time. "If you're listening, we're losing the Cascade project. The investors are walking. We need you back, please." I sat there, phone in hand, while Lucas slid the plate of cheesecake in front of me. "You're not going to answer, are you?" he asked. I shook my head slowly. "Not yet." Because in that moment, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't scrambling to fix what other people had broken. I wasn't reacting. I was watching. And in that sweet, deliberate silence, I finally understood the difference between being needed and being valued. What came next wasn't revenge. It was something much colder, much smarter, and entirely mine. We returned home 1 week later. The sunburn on my shoulders was fading, but the clarity I'd gained during that time away, that stayed with me. The moment we walked into our apartment, my phone started buzzing again. New messages, more missed calls. Even a few emails marked urgent in all caps, like urgency, could erase betrayal. I didn't answer. Instead, I brewed a pot of coffee, sat at the dining table with my laptop, and opened a blank document. Business plan, Monroe Standards. That was the name. Simple, sharp. It sounded like structure, like order, like the exact thing they thought they could take from me. I spent the next 3 days outlining the core of what would become a consulting firm specializing in compliance project system audits and architectural ethics. I knew the weak points in the industry, I knew how shortcuts slipped through, and I knew how to build systems that made it nearly impossible to cheat. Lucas connected me with the right people, quietly, carefully. Within a week, I had a meeting with the city's Planning and Infrastructure Committee, not as a job applicant, as a potential consultant. They'd heard about the Cascade fallout, they'd seen the headlines, and they were curious about the woman who built a system no one else could untangle. By the end of the month, Monroe Standards was officially registered, and on the same day the paperwork was approved, I received one final message from Jeff Halcyon. Eden, name your salary. We'll bring you back. Please, we need you. This time, I did respond. I'm not available for hire, I wrote. But my firm is available for partnership. At our rates, under our terms. I didn't wait for a reply. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't looking for approval. I was setting the price. And they were about to find out just how expensive it would be. At first, the headlines were small, just murmurs in the local press. Permit irregularities delay major development project. Cascade build hits unexpected roadblocks. But those murmurs got louder. Because once the city began their audit, the one Lucas helped trigger, things started to unravel faster than even I expected. The submission files from Halcyon Design didn't just have errors, they had lies. Missing fire safety corridors, structurally unsound wall adjustments, questionable material substitutions masked under phony revisions. And the worst part? The timestamps placed those changes after my approval, just as Lucas had warned. What began as inconvenience became investigation. What began as whispers became headlines. And what began as a betrayal became justice in motion. Within 2 weeks, the Cascade project was frozen indefinitely. Funding halted, investors pulled out, and Claudia Rice, the woman who once texted me out of my own career, was suspended pending review. I didn't celebrate, not publicly at least, but the irony wasn't lost on me. She tried to erase me from the blueprint and ended up watching the whole structure collapse. Jeff Halcyon went silent. His name disappeared from my notifications. I heard from industry contacts that he'd fired Claudia quietly trying to save the company's name. But it was too late. Halcyon Design wasn't just struggling. It was bleeding reputation, trust, money, all because one person tried to cut corners and another tried to stay quiet about it. And meanwhile, my phone buzzed again. Only this time, it wasn't a plea. It was an invitation. Jeff wanted to meet. Face to face, in person, at Halcyon headquarters. I stared at the message, unsure if I felt curiosity or contempt, maybe both. Either way, I said yes, because I had a feeling they weren't finished breaking things yet, but this time, I wouldn't be the one left in pieces. I hadn't stepped foot inside Halcyon's offices in over a month, not since the wedding, not since the message. The building looked the same, sleek glass walls, steel trim, curated art meant to impress clients. But walking through it now, something felt different. The receptionist gave me a polite, almost reverent nod. Ms. Monroe, Mr. Halcyon is expecting you. Conference room 3. I walked past rows of unfamiliar faces, people I didn't recognize. Many of the old staff were gone. The ones who remained avoided eye contact, like my presence was some kind of ghost they weren't sure how to greet. The door to the conference room was open. Jeff stood when I entered. Older than I remembered, more gray in his beard. Eyes tired. He reached out to shake my hand. "Thank you for coming." I nodded. No smile. But then I saw her, Claudia, sitting at the far end of the table, back straight, hands folded. Like this was just another meeting, like she hadn't lit the fuse that set the whole place on fire. I froze in the doorway. Jeff cleared his throat. I asked her to be here. She has something to say. I sat, slowly, silently. Claudia looked at me, and for the first time in our entire working relationship, she didn't look smug. She looked hollow. "I owe you an apology," she said. The words hung in the air like dust, fragile and awkward. She continued, "I let ambition get in the way of ethics. I didn't trust the system you built, and I was wrong. You didn't deserve what I did." It didn't sound rehearsed, but it didn't feel redemptive either. Jeff slid a folder across the table. Blueprints, safety protocols, updated processes. "We want your eyes on all of it," he said. "As a consultant, independent, uncompromised." Then he placed something else on the table, a check, and beside it, a small USB drive. "The system you built, the one she tried to bury, it's all here, fully restored. We've managed to get it functioning again, but without you, it doesn't run right." I stared at the tiny silver drive. The same system I spent years building, the one they tried to lock me out of, now being handed back like a peace offering. Or maybe a bribe. I didn't touch it, not yet, because I had a better idea, one they weren't going to see coming. I didn't pick up the USB. I didn't even glance at the check again. Instead, I looked straight at Jeff, calm, measured. "You're not asking me to come back," I said. He nodded slowly. "No, we know that bridge is burned." "Then why this meeting?" Because he sighed, "We want you to help us rebuild the right way this time. Systems, protocols, transparency. Claudia is no longer in a leadership role. She's agreed to step into training, from the ground up." Claudia didn't speak. She just stared at the edge of the table. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then I reached for the folder. I flipped through the pages. The layout was decent. The language had improved. There were real steps toward compliance and reform, but it still lacked one thing: me. "I'll consult," I said, "but not on your terms." Jeff leaned forward, listening. "My company, Monroe Standards, will remain fully independent. We don't work for Halcyon. We work with it. Every project goes through triple verification. My team leads all compliance reviews. I approve the workflows. And if anything gets hidden again, we walk. No negotiations." Jeff nodded. "Understood." "What else?" My eyes shifted to Claudia. "You," I said, "you will complete every single training module we assign. No shortcuts, no exemptions. You will earn the credibility you tried to fake." Claudia's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "And the check?" Jeff asked. I slid it back across the table. "Unnecessary." Then I looked at Claudia again, steady, unwavering. "You wanted to give me a gift the day you fired me. Consider this mine, a chance to rebuild yourself properly under watch." Neither of them spoke, and I didn't need them to, because for the first time since this all began, I wasn't reacting. I was leading. And I hadn't even told them the most important part yet, the part that would change everything again. At first, I didn't expect much. Claudia started her training like a formality, quiet, stiff, never asking questions. My team assigned her the same modules we gave to every junior consultant: safety protocols, legal compliance, documentation integrity. She completed them without protest. No excuses, no shortcuts. Week after week, I reviewed her scores. Perfect. Then came the reports, more detailed than expected. Methodical, even thoughtful. Still, I kept my guard up. You can memorize rules without believing in them. You can follow instructions without changing who you are. But something shifted around the third month. One morning, I arrived early for an on-site review at a Halcyon project downtown. Claudia was already there, clipboard in hand, hard hat on, walking the perimeter with a junior architect. She wasn't just observing, she was explaining. Not the what, the why. Why materials had to meet certain standards. Why a missing anchor point wasn't just a small detail. Why it mattered. I stayed out of sight and just listened. And for the first time, I heard something in her voice that hadn't been there before: humility. Later that week, she sent me a draft of a new internal training guide, built from everything she had learned. She asked for feedback. I gave it. She applied every note. It wasn't redemption. Not yet, but it was something. A few days later, Jeff called me. "We're considering moving Claudia into a senior oversight role," he said, "but only if you support it." I didn't answer right away, because this wasn't about second chances anymore. This was about responsibility, about ownership. And if Claudia was truly ready for that, there was one test left, one that couldn't be passed on paper, and she had no idea it was coming. The test wasn't written. It wasn't technical. It wasn't something Claudia could study for. It was a community presentation. A full room, all eyes on you briefing, where she would stand in front of dozens of local residents, business owners, engineers, and activists and explain Halcyon's next major redevelopment plan, live, transparent, recorded. There would be questions, some angry, some skeptical, some deeply personal. And I told Jeff clearly, if she can't do this with honesty, she's not ready. The day of the presentation, I arrived early and sat in the back unnoticed. Claudia was already at the front, checking sound equipment and reviewing the slides one last time. No assistance, no PR handler, no safety net. When the meeting began, she took the mic and paused. Her hands didn't shake, but her voice wavered on the first sentence. Then she breathed and began again. "Some of you know who I am, and some of you may know what I've done or failed to do. I'm not here today to rewrite history. I'm here because this project deserves better than shortcuts, and so do you." That sentence changed the energy in the room. What followed wasn't just technical updates or sterile policy talk. It was honest, sometimes awkward, but real. She admitted what she didn't know. She promised to follow up where she couldn't answer. And most importantly, she made space for the voices in the room, the ones Halcyon had ignored for years. People asked hard questions. She stayed. When it ended, a few residents even clapped. Back at the office, I met her in the hallway. "You knew I'd be there, didn't you?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "Yeah, but I needed to say it for them, not for you." For the first time, I believed her. Later that night, I got a message from Jeff. "The board's approved her promotion. We're making it official. You okay with that?" I stared at the message for a long moment, because this story, which started with a wedding dress and a termination text, had become something else entirely, something I hadn't planned. And just as I was about to respond, a news alert lit up my screen. And suddenly, everything we'd built, everything we thought was secure, was at risk. Again. The news alert hit just after midnight. Halcyon's biggest competitor, the firm that had tried to scoop up Cascade after our fallout, was under federal investigation. Bribery, safety violations, forged approvals. The headlines were brutal. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. Lucas, already half asleep beside me, opened one eye. "What's wrong?" I showed him the headline. He sat up slowly. "You think Jeff knew this was coming?" I nodded. "Probably." That's why he wanted to move fast, why he wanted me on board. He was betting the fall of one empire could rebuild his own. But for once, I didn't feel manipulated. I felt clear. The next morning, I called Jeff and told him we'd proceed under the same terms: independent, transparent, accountable. And Claudia, she would lead, yes, but always with oversight, always with humility. She didn't argue. In the months that followed, Halcyon rebuilt its name not on ego this time, but on structure, on systems that couldn't be gamed, on leadership that didn't pretend to know everything. As for me, I kept building Monroe standards. We grew slowly, intentionally, because growth meant nothing if it wasn't rooted in trust. And somewhere along the way, I realized something that took me years to understand. Real power isn't loud. It doesn't crush. Real power builds, quietly, steadily, on your terms. It doesn't burn things down to make a point. It lays foundations others can stand on, even if they once tried to push you off the ledge. If you've ever been wronged, I hope this story reminds you you don't have to become what hurt you to rise above it. You just have to decide what kind of legacy you want to leave behind. And maybe ask yourself, if it were you, would you rebuild the bridge or let it stay ash?